The University of Minnesota has placed a hold on hiring a Jewish professor over his views on the ongoing war on Gaza. In fact, not only is he Jewish, he's actually Israeli as well. Now, the controversy centers on what Raz Segal, who's an Israeli associate professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Stockton University in New Jersey, wrote in the Jewish Currents on October 13th of last year. The assault on Gaza can also be understood in other terms as a textbook case of genocide unfolding in front of our eyes, he wrote. I say this as a scholar of genocide who has spent many years writing about Israeli mass violence against Palestinians. So there you have it. That is exactly what has led to controversy over him being chosen for the exact same role that he's currently serving in New Jersey. They wanted him to serve that role in the University of Minnesota, but it looks like that might not happen at all as the hiring process has been put on hold indefinitely. So in 2022, he also wrote about the reality of the system of Israeli apartheid, stating that just as the Israeli apartheid system denies Palestinians' past, it also seeks to deny their future through an assault against Palestinian children. So as a result of takes like that, a spokesperson for the University of Minnesota said that the director selection process was, quote, put on hold to allow an opportunity to determine next steps. What are the next steps supposed to be? Either you're gonna hire him or you're not. And if I were to predict what I think is gonna happen, I think they're just going to avoid hiring him, hope that this story goes away, hope that the public will forget about it. And to be sure, stories like this have been popping up left and right. And so I'm sure some people will forget about it. But I think it's an injustice to refuse to hire someone who was a great candidate for this position and who's literally an expert on genocide. That is what his expertise is in. And his views on Israel carrying out a genocide in Gaza is apparently something that has no merit, even though he's the expert on genocide and Holocaust. So members of the university community have come forward to express their interest in providing perspective on the hiring of the position of director of the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies. The spokesperson who spoke to Jewish Insider said, because of the community-facing and leadership role the director holds, it is important that these voices are heard.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
For those who are offended by, his take on what Israel is doing in Gaza and how he believes it amounts to genocide, this is a fascinating debate to have, no? In what kind of environment? I would say an environment of higher learning, an environment like a university campus. And look, I totally understand that a lot of major universities had become pretty homogenous in their thinking as of late, especially over like the last decade. And I do believe that that's a problem. You'd have conservative speakers want to do speeches on campus, and then there'd be like mass protests because students didn't want to hear opinions they didn't like or found offensive. But we spoke out against that because I think universities are supposed to have these kinds of debates. These are the types of intellectual debates that should be had. And the idea that certain viewpoints should be censored entirely is ridiculous to me. And it appears that's what's happening at the University of Minnesota. So after he was chosen, by the way, he was chosen for the center's new director by a woman named Ann Waltner. She's the interim dean of the College of Liberal Arts at the University of Minnesota. After his name was announced, two of the professors at the university decided to resign in protest. One of those university professors said the following, quote, "My understanding is that the core mission of the center is to educate locally and internationally on the specific history of the Holocaust and of genocide in order to raise awareness and prevent further dehumanization and violence. Professor Siegel, by justifying Hamas's atrocities, he's never done that. He has never once justified Hamas's atrocities, but nonetheless, that's what he's alleging. 5 days after they occurred, via perverse allegation that Israel was committing a genocide, cannot fulfill the mission of the center. So understand that viewpoint that was just expressed. So under those kinds of standards, anyone who dare to criticize Israel, regardless of what the government does, right? Like if the government of Israel has decided to like drop a nuclear bomb in Gaza and you criticize Netanyahu for doing it, that means that you're justifying Hamas's atrocities. It's just so ridiculous to me. So what exactly is the red line for people like this professor who's so upset at a genocide expert declaring that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide? By the way, as we've also reported, co-founder of Human Rights Watch and a Holocaust survivor also told Fareed Zakaria that he feels that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. Is he also someone who justifies Hamas's atrocities? Like, how disgusting and defamatory is that kind of statement? And what also likely ruffled some feathers was Siegel's views on the college encampments where students had demanded that their institutions divest from companies that support the ongoing war on Gaza. And so last month, he downplayed, according to the Jewish Insider, the illegal anti-Israeli encampments that have engulfed campuses nationwide, telling New Jersey Spotlight News that claims of anti-Semitism were baseless. And that's because overall, they are baseless. You might be able to find an instance or two of someone saying something reprehensible and disgusting, and they should be condemned whenever that arises, whenever anti-Semitism arises. But the protests had nothing to do with Jewish people. In fact, Jewish people were part of those encampments, part of those university protests. The fact of the matter is, I think that there is a bit of a generational divide to some extent, because young people are pretty unafraid to tell the truth as they see it. And older people are, I don't know what's going on with older generations in this country, but they're under the impression that ever criticizing Israel just automatically means that you're an anti-Semite. And it's ridiculous, unfounded, and incredibly defamatory. Because I think the statements and the concerns of the peace protesters are pretty clear. They want a ceasefire in Gaza. They want the slaughter to stop. Finally, this isn't just a isolated story that I'm bringing to your attention. There really is an effort to censor and shut down people who want to speak out about what's happening to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And what's really concerning is that despite our First Amendment rights here in the United States, you have members of Congress, the House of Representatives, voting on legislation that would punish the expression of those who have a problem with what Israel is carrying out in Gaza. And Thomas Massie, who is in the House of Representatives and voted against that legislation, spoke about it during a recent interview with Tucker Carlson.
So recently they brought a bill to Congress, and this was actually a binding bill, not a non-binding resolution. Like, this was going to have the effect of law, and people would get, prosecuted if they engaged in anti-Semitism on campuses. And the problem with this bill is they use some international definition of anti-Semitism on a website somewhere. My first question is, why don't you just put the definition in the bill? Why are you pointing to somebody's URL in a piece of legislation?
You are the Congress, right?
Right, we are the Congress.
Write the laws.
We should be. Instead, we're referencing a website, that's not even, hosted in the United States. And so I went to this website, and it's got a fairly short definition, but it's also got examples of things that would be considered anti-Semitism. And some of these are actually passages in the New Testament.
So members of Congress are willing to sell out our constitutional rights in order to virtue signal to a foreign government, Israel. Would they do that on behalf of any other government? I doubt it. And why is it? Why is it that our federal government, our members of Congress in the House of Representatives would be willing to do this. Well, I mean, you don't want to go against the Israel lobby. You don't want to go against AIPAC. Jamal Bowman, a congressman out of New York, knows firsthand what AIPAC will do to you. Story that we'll cover on the show a little later today. He is now trailing in the primary for his district. And AIPAC has already pumped a lot of money in trying to destroy Bowman for having the audacity to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. These politicians are cowards. They're such cowards, and they're so self-interested, and they're so obsessed with their own political power that they will literally propose and vote on unconstitutional legislation that would punish American citizens for expressing their views on this ongoing war on Gaza. And all of those free speech warriors, all of those people who were crying and whining about cancel culture day in and day out, those tend to be the figures, conservative figures, that we're not hearing much from. Strange, isn't it?
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.